I did this trick that I pretty much do on everything always.
If you look at my sessions, I'm drawing shit like crazy, like anywhere I can.
So we're like pushing each other, but we're both like, shh, because we're so excited hearing what he's doing.
And I think to give the vocal a bit of a pulse to it, so in that vocal sound there's some timing.
But you can like hold these big sort of polyphonic textural notes, but as they're decaying, they're still being sequenced, and you can kind of overlap.
This episode is being supported by Tape It, the iPhone recording app made for musicians by musicians.
It's pretty rare that I want, which sometimes why my songs are very hard to play on acoustic guitar, because I rarely want one instrument to be doing all the chord information. It's very rare that I like that. You know, like, so for example, like, you know, this is sort of one layer of instruments. Sometimes the bass catches. Right there, I caught it, bum, 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 but not really following it, no. Terribly close. Even these acoustics, which are really bright, are only catching the chords on sort of the back half. You know, no one's going bum, 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 following the exact thing. And to me, it's a method of recording where you can let the vocal shine a little bit more, because everyone's sort of dancing around it.
The arrangement I nail quite early. I'm sort of happy with the arrangement quite early on. The stuff I'm saying I'm changing all the time with when I'm playing out is the mix, the balance of things. Like there's this bit up here where, so you can see where I've got into a mess. Like there's I've got like a kick drum, and then there'll have been some sort of problem with it where I've now added another channel of it won't have had enough weight, so I've added a very, very small bit of just pure sine wave sub bass underneath the kick that's almost inaudible. Like you can't hear it on headphones or whatever, but if you're in a big club or something, it just gives the weight just below what's going on. And then I've had another problem with the kick where it's not sort of cutting through, so I've just added this very little click to the kick drum as well. And it's the combination of all three sounds is sort of like getting the effect that I want when I'm hearing it out. But I wouldn't have really understood what I need to do with that sub or adding the click or whatever. I don't necessarily see those problems straight away. It's like further down the line.
Yeah. And are you mostly using hardware when you're creating all these sounds?
Oh, yeah, with the exception of one track that I pulled up, which looks like an Arturia Lab 5. These are all old synths. And I don't mean that in a totally snob way, but just simply that the edict for the record was like, move electricity around, move air through a room. I find that sometimes if I'm working with plugins, you can sometimes hear with your eyes and instead of with your ears. And I like committing things. I like committing the sounds, because instead of building a house on sand, you're building a house on a firm foundation of an idea. I don't. It would make me too crazy, I think, with unopened, unexplored possibilities to record everything dry and then put a bunch of plugins on them. That would make me crazy, because you've made no decisions.
That was actually an Arturia version of an OB4. So there's an OB expander, and then there's an OB8. So I think when I started it, I was using an Oberheim expander. But this is the plug-in version, and then eventually I switched it out to an Oberheim 4-voice plugin.
Right.
So it's just kind of doing it in intervals. I think it's fifths. And you can just open up the filter and it just kind of becomes huge, or you can close the filter and it just becomes very sort of subtle and rhythmic, and it sits in the back. So this is the sound that kind of threads through the whole track, and towards the end and the big builds, this is the main sound that kind of opens up. It's just opening up that filter and decay, and it sort of becomes this really enormous sound as the track comes on.
Yeah, because this whole section is really hypnotic and you'd get into a trance.
It's kind of quite restrained, and that's just sort of like, and again, it's sort of like the Prophet 5 is doing the bass, but when it gets to this section, I really open up the filter on the bass, and that kind of creates a lot more breadth. So the bass and the drum break. So the filter opens up and the drum break comes in, and that's really what creates the sort of rise in energy.
We did this cool thing where when we were doing some of the guitars, Joey was like unplugging something on his pedal board, but because there was loads of reverb on his amps, the sound of him unplugging the pedals sounded great. And I was like, oh, can we do that in time with the snare? So there's a kind of this weird spring effect here, like that. And that's kind of, I kind of layered that on top of the snare in the chorus. So it's kind of all in there. It sounds like it's part of the snare. I remember that being a fun thing to do, like kind of like, again, hands and knees going in time with the tune.
And Joe just grabbed it was a hollow body bass and was like trying to find notes that he wanted to go with it. And he started playing it. And because it was a hollow body, through a pretty cranked bass amp, it started feeding back while he was making these notes, and there was a really sick harmonic came through, and we were all like, "Oh, that's sick, that's sick, that's sick!" So Miko can play that bit. So he's kind of playing.
This is one of those moments where Kenny talked where you just got no clue what is happening, but something's sounding really cool, and you're just capturing this kind of wild stuff, and you're like, "How is this going to turn into a song?" But
you can hear the first harmonics there, and then you'll hear the second one in a bit.
That was Joe screaming in the background.
Nice. And
so we had the bass feedback, and there was like these different harmonics. And then we kind of moved around the room, found the different harmonics, and then we started to create these chords from it that then became the chords across the bit.
But at first, they sounded bad when it was all feedback. The feedback actually against each other sonically was really hard to read, and even hard panned on different sides, one note at a time with a bunch of EQ. It didn't create this kind of big, full kind of cloud thing that I think we were hoping for. And Nige started to kind of do it his way. And he almost was kind of, I think, frustrated with all of us. It was kind of just like, it was kind of like a move kind of vibe. And walked over, he added a few different things to it that were already things that were in there harmonically, but played different ways and done different ways. And me, Lee, and Bowen, I kid you not, jumping up and down, like running around the back of the room in La Fabrique, but trying not to let him hear us. So we're like pushing each other, but we're both like, shh, because we're so excited hearing what he's doing. And Nigel walked up to the computer, sat right there for 15 minutes and just started shifting all of the feedback, all of the things that he kind of put in. And we were like really punching each other, like, what is happening? And we called it full Nigel. So from then on, it was like, he's going full Nige. Yeah. And that was the first time.
So yeah, what it was like we were at one point, and I think Joe had gone to bed. And I was like, pop needs more chords. So we got the Prophet up, and I just started playing, trying to find chords. And I was just playing lots of different stuff.
Yeah.
And Nigel was just grabbing it all. And I was just like, couldn't, like, I was playing all these different, like, just like 2-note things, 3-note things, trying to like really expand out and do lots of different stuff.
But always a note that isn't already there. I remember it was always like, what note isn't there that could be there? And that kept going on. Yeah. For like, how many notes can fit?
And then Nigel just like took it and chopped it all up and put it in, and we were all going, what?
to me, it was so exciting to see, as someone who grew up programming drums and doing so much on a computer with samples, because you think of a guy like Nigel as someone who's like this purist, you know what I mean, guy who records bands and instruments in this way and just is basically chopping samples, you know what I mean? He was taking just these little bits of all these recordings that were kind of inconsequential.
What are we hearing here, Miko, then?
This is just all different kind of Prophet tracks that have been cut up and put together.
So these are all the different Prophet things that Bowen worked on and other people worked on. Then this is Nigel's rearrangement of all these into some kind of form.
Yes, and layered in with feedback also.
Right.
So it becomes kind of hard to tell on first listen for people what's real feedback, what's a Prophet, where does one thing end, where does one start?
Yeah, we had the Prophet going for a big muff as well, so that's giving all those kind of distortion overtones there.
So sick.
I'll try not to loop everything in fours. So I'll have like the hi-hats will be a sequence of it might be like 5 notes or a bar and a half. And then the snares will repeat in 3s. So everything is every hit is slightly different. So, you know, you get a full sequence of like 16 bars before anything is exactly the same. Even though it's very subtle, it kind of makes it feel a little looser and that you're not really getting that repetition as much because things aren't hitting in exactly the same place each time.
Yeah.
So I had the harp thing, and then I did this trick that I pretty much do on everything always, which is get some sort of MIDI pattern together, and then put some sort of randomization on the velocity of the MIDI notes. So I've put the velocity and I've made it random 15% or whatever. So it's just every time the harp note hits, it's playing it a little harder, a little softer, and then that makes it a little more humanized. And then I'm asking it also to 15% of the time to pick one of the notes and play either an octave up or an octave below, and it stops the pattern being totally repetitive. You just get these little sparkles and twinkles and things. However, every time I play back this track, it's different because of the randomization.
Time for a quick Tape It feature highlight. Did you know that while you're recording, you can drop markers? No more scrolling through endless voice notes. Once you've finished, you can go back to the markers to find your best bits. You can also name your markers if there's a specific note you want to add. To find out more, follow the link in the description or use the promo code TAPENOTES for 20% off Tape It Pro.
So I have a Rhodes in my studio, and I sent it through these low pass gates, which were like sequenced. So it was a make noise low pass gate, sequenced by something else from Eurorack. But what I really liked about it was having this playing Rhodes through the sequence in real time. So as the decays of the notes, and of course you can like hold these big sort of polyphonic textural notes, but as they're decaying, they're still being sequenced, and you can kind of overlap different notes and just kind of keep everything very loose and polyphonic, but it's still going to exist within this sort of sequenced structure. So that was the kind of the idea. So the Rhodes and the bass, which is also a Rhodes, through a modular low pass sequence, which was this. So it's kind of the sequence stays the same. The sequence is always kind of going along, and it's just how you interact with that sequence on the piano, basically. So as you're playing the Rhodes, it's gonna get triggered by this modular low pass sequence, which is really fun, and it's a very like real time thing. You know, it's not this patch will sort of suggest how you interact with it, because it's very textural. So it's just nice to kind of hear these notes decaying, or the release times decaying through this low pass.
Yeah,
this low pass thing.
So in a way, you almost start playing with it. It's like your partner as you're playing with it.
Yeah, exactly. It's keeping the time, and then you're just contributing the notes and the sounds to it. And then I think there's also another thing that's going on, which is this pitched reverb. So there's a reverb return that I'll send through a pitch shifter. So I think this one was like a ninth above the root notes. So you're just having this reverb return that's coming in, but it's 9 semitones above what's going in. So it has this sort of like shimmery, harmonizing reverb thing that comes in. So that's the kind of slightly higher pitched thing that you can kind of hear.
But that's not connected to the sequence.
No, that's in Ableton.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's on the return shell. In fact, I'll try and bring one of them in, because I save these return channels when I make them, and it's something that's like. All right, so this is an example of one of these.
In Ableton, you can kind of, if you take a sample like this, you just move this around. This is always changing, right? So I was doing this like live on this record, and it was these weird stabs in this really pretty voice, because the doo-wop singers had sick voices. So I just kind of was playing around with the stabs in Ableton looping, and then it came up with this loop.
I actually separate out the breaths, which I don't always do. I think to go with the ASMR-ness of the guitar. So all the breaths I think have some like light sample delay on it to make it slightly more three-dimensional. But then when it comes back in the next one, I actually put an echo on those breaths. So suddenly it's this kind of... Wow. So it becomes part of the texture where there's so few drums. But, you know, it's like, I think the second verse, I'm also messing with the pitch a bit. You can hear... Saving the world, getting a girl, serenade, I remember it all.
So I had like... Where's the vocal? Like it's been time stretched so much, it's in an uncomfortable position, and then to sort of mask that, I must have like, what have I done here? I've made just a small loop of a bit of the vocal, and I think to give the vocal a bit of a pulse to it, so in that vocal sound there's some timing, so that there's you hear the voice and it's got a bit of a groove to it that you can sort of like lock in and cover up a bit of the weird time stretching artifacts and everything. So I had that and a kick drum. Where's the kick drum? Yeah. Like this is the starting point. I had that.
If you look at my sessions, I'm drawing shit like crazy, like anywhere I can. Yeah, like if you look at how drawn out the sax is, that's really fun for me, especially when it comes to delays. So like, for example, if I'm here. You only call me after midnight. So I just like really just feel it and play it like an instrument. And then you have these moments that... So that's what I just drew right now, which honestly is pretty cool. Out. So much time is spent like, you know, like, I say a big part of, like, I guess what I'm trying to get across here is like, work on this big, expensive, in terms of how much time you spend, you know, section of vocoders and whatnot, and then put it all in a bus, throw it around. And then just debase the fuck out of it until it just exists in some interesting little supportive role.
Yeah.
And another trick I love is to literally fuck with the master. So as you can see, there's a chorus that comes on top of the master. I'll do an exaggerated version, but there's another place I draw. So like, if I want to completely take a section into a new zone, sometimes I don't like to get into the minutiae of the tracks and just do it all in the master. So like, this is not what I did or would do with the song, but let's say I want this to live in a totally different place. I put an echo on the entire master, and then I just draw it. So watch this. I want to go to the bridge. I want it to feel totally different. Absurdist example, but it's obviously like the most extreme example, but it's a really nice way to completely leave sections. I also love to put a tremolo on the master.